Okay, so this video is going to be called the Special Negro Complex. I spoke a little bit about this on Facebook, and because what's going on recently in the news, the things that I was coming in contact with, personal and in the media, it kind of felt right to make this video and explain what a Special Negro complex is. However, it was during an event. It was Haitian Revolution leaders. It was from October 27th to October 29th from 4 o'clock p.m. to 7 p.m. I was intrigued because, if you don't know, I am Haitian. I wanted to know more about my history, so when this event was going on, I definitely participated, saved my date, came there. Long story short, I arrived there on time, couldn't find the building, so I was on CP time. Finally made it, and to my surprise, our history isn't even being taught by a black person. Not necessarily saying that you have to be black to talk about black history, but you don't see black people talking about Irish history. I'm just saying. I took a couple of notes about what the speaker was saying, and FYI, the speaker's name is Philip Gerard. Philip Gerard was the speaker's name, and he is French, I believe, from his accent. I'm guessing he was French, and his name. So I collected a few notes of mine and a couple of pictures. I might add it to the video if necessary, but I don't feel like it is, but we'll see. The first person we were talking about on the 27th, because on the 27th, 28th, and 29th, he was going to talk about different public figures, and the first public figure he was talking about, Jean-Baptiste Belly. And from what I collect, who also was at the event was Professor Henry Gates. I don't know if y'all know who he is. It's the black guy who does the tracing your roots back to wherever your roots lead you into Africa. He does that on the PBS channel. He was also made headlines when he got locked out of his home in Cambridge, and the police arrested him because his neighbors called and said, you know, this strange black man is breaking into someone's house. Come to find out, he locked himself out, and his own neighbors didn't recognize him and called the police on him, and that was a big scandal. Back to my story. I should have started the video describing what is a Special Negro. Let me do that right now. This is the Special Negro Complex. I wrote a definition for it. Definition: Special Negro Complex is a black person who believes if they act, think, say, dress, etc. in a certain way, usually European, they will be treated better, A, given a superior status, B, or rewarded over other blacks, C, who don't adhere or adjust to European standards/system, thus finding a niche inside of white society. So that is a Special Negro. Again, the Special Negro Complex is a black person who believes if they act, think, say, dress, etc. in a certain way, usually European, they will be treated better, A, given a superior status, B, or rewarded over other blacks who don't adhere or adjust to European standards, system, C, and thus finding a niche within white society. Billy was the type of person who had the Special Negro Complex. He was a black man during slavery on the territorial landmass known at that time as Hispaniola, and he was enslaved. He was able to buy his freedom, and then from there on he said, might as well hurt your slaves. So he had worked himself up from the bottom and had achieved high society status because he owned slaves like the Europeans. And because of that, gaining the status, he wanted to prove that he could be just as French, just as respectable and human as the French. So these are his life experience trying to achieve that Special Negro Complex. And at that time, Haiti was called Santo Domingo. And to call someone from Haiti at that time was Creole. So that's interesting. The language today is Creole. Benny was the first black deputy in France born as a slave. He was at age of 2 deported to Haiti. He was captured in Africa and sent over to Haiti. Yet Benny, when you look at his writing, was kind of conflicting because you can kind of see where he was coming from in the sense of reinventing himself. What was speculated is that he was born in Africa, captured and sent to Haiti. But throughout his own writing, he said that he was born in Africa. Then in other writings, he'll say, I was born in Haiti. And then other writings, he'll say something else. So it seems like whatever he was going through in his personal life at that time, that's how he rewritten himself. He rewrote himself the way he wanted others to view him and depict him, contradicting his experiences in his life. So no one really knows because no one actually had record of slaves that were kept well. Depending on what you read and what stage in his life he was in, he was either born in Africa or he was born in the Santo Domingo. What I gained through the whole lecture in itself was there was a lot of compromising Negroes in the sense of if I can get some type of benefits, if I can rub shoulders with white folks, if I can get some type of special treatment, then I'll overlook certain things. I will suffer certain things. I will basically compromise my position or my beliefs or value, self-respect, in the hopes that whatever I'm looking for, I'll achieve it through white society. Billy fought aside white generals who promised freedom to slaves who fought in his losing side, just like when blacks fought with the Union in the Civil War against the South. When Lincoln said, if you fight for me, then I will give you freedom. It's the same way how Billy Belay was able to maneuver and fight on the side of France. Billy was involved in 3 wars. He was involved in the British War, the American Revolutionary War, and he was also involved in the Haitian Revolution. So that was interesting. And his right as a black man, but also as a Frenchman, working and aiding these white entities who didn't value and who didn't see the importance of him as an individual. The speaker told a story about a conversation where a white person said something like, these black people must have some type of humanity because they laugh, saying that they're not degenerates or animals or half human, half something else because they cry. Feelings and empathy is a sign of humanity, but I guess owning and breeding people, if you're white, kind of iffy, Morals and feelings don't really count if you're making money. Another story he told about a Haitian woman who owned plantations and who owned multiple slaves, and she was a rich woman. And when she heard that slavery was going to be banned in Haiti, she fainted. And people assumed because she's black and she's in Haiti, she fainted because she was so overwhelmed with emotion that finally she'll be free, when in actuality she was looking at all her money going down the drain. Another thing about that whole compromising Negro aspect. Many people were for slavery because of the economic benefits. I mean, you're making hand over foot and money off of human labor. You don't have to pay them. You don't have to even give them the bare minimum and basic necessities because they're just things. They're not even people. So a lot of people sacrificed or ignored, neglected their morality aspect because the money was so good. When Billy wanted to enter into the French politics arena, a lot of people opposed to him trying to infiltrate. They depicted him and other blacks as savages and bloodthirsty and just people, or not even people, things that you should be aware of. Kind of like how Birth of a Nation depicted black people. That whole scary, killer, half-human, violent Negro on the loose campaign was also active in France. Before Haiti sought out their freedom and fought for their freedom, France temporarily banned slavery, trying to appeal to having more of a humanity aspect. But in other islands where France also banned slavery temporarily, like Martinique, those white slave owners were like, I don't care what they're doing in Haiti, y'all ain't free, y'all still get to picking and cutting sugar cane. And that's what was happening when France temporarily gave freedom and banned slavery, because French people were so outraged and felt that they did not deserve freedom, and giving them freedom too soon will eventually be the demise of them. France reenacted slavery, and from then the Haitians were like, we're not taking that, we're not going to go back to sugarcane, F what you heard, we're going to war for this, we're not going to take it. And this is when Napoleon and his army came into Haiti to reinstall the institution of slavery. When Napoleon, who, surprise, happens to be Belé's brother-in-law, took Bélé to Haiti and other colored, at the time colored, French army men to Haiti to fight the Haitians, which is interesting that, again, the special Negro complex, I'm going to align myself with France, a powerful entity right now, to go against other blacks because I'm special, I'm chosen, they respect me. I'm going to align my interests with the enemy because, after all, I don't know about you Negroes, but I'm going to get mines. So when Benet gets to Haiti, Napoleon uses Benet to attract Toussaint and the other Haitians to have a meeting with him. And then once the black army men of French meet with the rebellions of Haitians who were aligning themselves with Toussaint Louverture, that's when Napoleon pulled a switcheroo and expelled Bélé and the blacks who worked for France back to French. So basically he kind of switched up the plans. He used Bélé as bait and then chucked him to the side. He thought he was special. Come to find out, you're not that special. When Napoleon and his great Frenchmen were thinking about going into Haiti, Bélé had a choice to either align himself with Haiti and help Toussaint Louverture, who he came to know in passing, or help France. He chose to align himself with France. He compromised himself to stand with France in hopes that France will recognize his humanity and France will validate his Frenchman citizen status. Though Benet opposed slavery, he didn't oppose the economy that came from slavery. And he also didn't oppose Haiti from being free, but he felt like Toussaint Louverture shouldn't have the power to run Haiti. He felt that he was too much of a rebel and it wouldn't be a good representation or leader for Haiti. While Bélé was being exported back to Haiti, Toussaint Louverture was also captured and then exiled to France. So not only did Bélé get caught up in a sweep, but also Toussaint Louverture, and they were both sent to islands off of the shore of France, isolated and jailed. Bélé was caught off guard because he had no idea why he was thrown in prison and what was his charge. He asked the courts and asked France, like, why did they charge him and what was his charge? He didn't get a response of why he was charged until 4 years later, after his death. As special as he thought he was, he ended getting traded and getting the boot from the people he aligned himself with. Benet in 1794 said blacks must be human because they cry. I'm not sure where that excerpt came from, but I picked that up during the lecture. And again, no one else has to prove their humanity. And you can see from then and still today, black people always have to prove their humanity to other people who don't necessarily have human instincts themselves. There's no type of humanity, there's no type of empathy or sympathy, but black folks have to continue to measure their worth using tools of other people who view us in a distorted lens anyways. Toussaint, he was actually a free man. So Toussaint, as compared to Benet, Toussaint could have been like, look, I'm free, I'm educated, I'm not like you other Negroes, I'm special, I'm above you. But instead of that, he saw how he was treated compared to the other blacks and said, you know, we're all one. If I get some type of benefit, we all should be getting benefits. As a matter of fact, none of us should be enslaved. Toussaint gained his freedom from being a manager on a sugar plantation. Benin gained his freedom from being a wig maker because, how today we have eyebrows on fleeks. I guess white males needed a toupee on fleek. After the whole presentation, we were given the opportunity to ask questions to the speaker. I asked 3 questions. I had 3 questions. I had questions in general, but 3 was the top I was going to go with. A couple other people asked questions. It was one white guy out of the room with a good size of black people. This one white guy asked about how he intertwined the Black Lives Matter movement, and he even said the words white supremacy and how that had involved it. I forgot what the Black Lives Matter part was, but he was basically saying, how white supremacy from the slave trade then and the slave economy affects black and white relations because of white supremacy. And the speaker kind of gave a nice overview of, we're going to have to work harder, and those were back in those days. Woo woo. I'm thinking you should be atoning what you have done, i.e. hitting the reparations. If you really are that sorry, you'd be like, we messed up. Let's try to make it better. Not an apologies, but a helping hand where blacks, Haitians who had suffered underneath white rule of France can now say, oh, we came up in the world. We have our own businesses. We have our own land. We have our own military. We are totally isolated, debt-free. We are our own independent nation who stand on our own independent feet. But again, white supremacy wouldn't allow that. So I asked my questions, and my questions were, does money compromise the morality of those French plantation owners? And he was honest with me that yes, money compromised people's humanity, because like I said, throughout the speech, the lecture, he was talking about how these blacks were trying to prove their humanity, trying to prove that they are just as good and they should be considered humans, but not only humans but French. And I said, because of the conversations and what you had presented, it seems interesting to me that people back in those days and white people seem to tend to compromise their morality and their humanity for money, and that has established what we know today as capitalism. The beginning stage of capitalism was back then, and he agreed and of course gave a nice cookie cutter stamp of approval answer, but I'm glad he was honest about the fact that yes, your morality is compromised when there's big money to make. And I asked him, was slavery the only way to come up? He pointed out that Benny came up being a wig maker, so slavery is not necessarily the only way to come up, but slavery is the best way to come up because it's, like I said, hand over foot money, versus you could be a craftsman or to be a wig maker or be a manager of some sorts, but blacks and they were going to be paid as much or valued as much. And slavery was the hot commodity at that time. It was the way to make big money easy. So that's what Billy got into, but he could have went another path, which I was thinking the same way too. He could have if he chose to, but he wanted that French stamp of approval, and that French stamp of approval was owning other people, owning blacks. Then I asked, was he going to talk about voodoo? And he was like, no, I'm just strictly talking about the leaders. I'm not going into that because none of the leaders practice it. I'm like, okay. But with the leaders he was talking about were Jean-Baptiste Bailly, Joseph and Marie Bonnel, Isaac Sasportas. So maybe they didn't. But other leaders like Toussaint Louverture and
Bookman Duty.
Yeah, maybe not practice it rigorously, but they practiced it when they decided to go against France. Now that we got through that lecture, I didn't come back for the second and third installment of it. I kind of got the gist of the first one, and it was disappointing to me that this is who you want to have a lecture on. A man who basically betrayed his people in hopes of getting a pat on the head by the dominant society who oppressed him and other people, to then be thrown in prison and given the big FU. This is a person where going to learn about. Obviously, karma got him, and the ancestors and whatever else you believe in, because he didn't win. Henry Gates kind of compared Billy to Du Bois, and I thought that was an interesting comparison because he talked about how Billy was a black man trying to fit in within white society like Du Bois. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, but they both got screwed trying to play that half-stepping and into both worlds, trying to be a black person and having respect, but also wanting to appease and get respect from people who came to you with disrespect and have disrespected your ancestors and you think that because you can smile wide enough and read bigger words and dance and have this knowledge and be extra careful of your blackness to not offend others, then eventually they'll have humanity for you. What makes you special as opposed to all these hundreds and thousands and millions of other blacks? It doesn't. But okay. What, last year when the whole North Korea exposed Sony leaks, that we found out that he was hiding, who was it? Matt Damon? One of these white actors, that his family owned slaves a time ago, and I'm not sure if he asked Henry Gates or Henry Gates just took it upon himself to hide that information. And when that came out, people were looking at Henry Gates funny style, and PBS was like, basically, that has nothing to do with us. That was him. Go after him. And I'm like, PBS threw you under the bus. Now I'm thinking you work with PBS. All this information that you're getting, that you're researching, it got to go through them, and they have to filter it out, since they would be the one filming and producing and editing. They would know this information. I'm hard pressed that they didn't, but they made sure you went under the bus and you got that attack, and they were like, wasn't me. But okay, keep on with the special Negro complex. So with Du Bois was one of those Negroes who believed that if they got a certain education, spoke a certain way, and aligned their beliefs according to white society, then they could be treated special. When Du Bois came to be after Frederick Douglass died, he felt that he was the next leader and the next person to shape and mold blacks as a whole. And then Garvey came in out of nowhere from Jamaica and then started getting mass attention, and I do believe there was a hint of jealousy there. He was against Garvey and his movement and what Garvey believed in. Du Bois made ad hominems against Garvey in public and was a believer of the Talented Tenth. Talented Tenth was a group of black people who had an elitist mindset, who thought that they should be the ones to guide the black community and to be the ones to make political decisions for black people, like how you see Reverend Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton of today, the leaders of the black society. That originated with the Talented Tenth mentality, as if black people individually just can't get it together. They have to have a leader. They have to be guided like sheep and shepherd. They had to be that shepherd. Du Bois was fresh out of Harvard and Europeanized. Du Bois' belief was to help blacks adapt to white society and culture through education, and then we can prove our worthiness to white people because we are the off-brand version of them. His belief was assimilate the best way you can, because through assimilation, that's how we can prove our worthiness. To do that, you can't have any of this African stuff like Garvey was doing, and you can't try to be connected or claim ourselves as Africans, so to not ruffle the feathers of white supremacy. Whereas Garvey was all black everything. Garvey was on that segregation, we gotta do for self, because if we're trying to manipulate into a system that doesn't even like us, we're going to be screwed. Modern day black America. Garvey had some beliefs that some people might consider radical, like to keep the race pure, when Du Bois believed, like I said, mixing and embedding and intermingling with the society, even through reproduction, was best, whereas Garvey said is going to be disastrous. Du Bois final straw with Garvey, I guess you could say, was when he worked with the FBI to have a campaign against Garvey, which was called the Garvey Must Go campaign, to try to deport him or get him kicked out the country, which actually worked. The FBI wanted to prevent the rise of the next Black Messiah, which most people believed Garvey was. Now, Du Bois had a change in mind and change of heart when he became elderly and he took a trip to Africa, Ghana, I believe, and he saw the glory of Africa, and his distorted Europeanized image of Africans in Africa got knocked down. So he started viewing Africans in Africa through the lenses of Garvey and seeing the greatness in the people, not the uncivilized belief that he had carried and believed from a European mindset. During his elderly time, Du Bois went against what he preached in his youth, but it was too late and his words were too weak. People believed in what he was saying, hence getting Garvey kicked out, hence coming into the mindset of getting your education, getting integrated, getting into what society, eventually they'll like us, as if Black folks weren't in the big house working and sleeping and abused by whites side by side by them. But for some reason, if we know how to say multi-syllabic words, somehow that's going to change things. Like I said, his momentum and his beliefs were exterminated the Black belief of, keeping Blackness Black and celebrating and embracing Blackness. Pro-Black African movement was contained through his anti-campaign against Garvey and Garveyism, which is called today. Today you learn in school about Du Bois, but you won't learn about Garvey. Another interesting thing that I want to talk about was the house slave and Halle Berry. Precious, idolized, beauty, can't do no wrong Halle Berry. Now, if y'all ever seen Roots, there was a series called Queen, and Halle Berry played in that televised series. And basically she was a mulatto who was born on a plantation. Her mother was very light-skinned and her father was a white male. Her mother was played by the woman who played Whitley Gilbert on A Different World. Halle Berry's character was very light enough to pass, but she was considered as a bastard mulatto who was kind of hidden. It was kind of like a secret on a plantation because the slave master was married to a white woman. The white woman knew of Halle Berry and kind of how she came to be, but she never liked Halle Berry, treat her miserably. She just didn't want to recognize her and accept her, and thus making the father, who was the slave owner, to not love her, to not treat her right, to not accept her as his. When Halle Berry was a child, she was given the opportunity to live in a big house, but she was treated as her half-sister's, I guess you could say, bodyguard slash personal assistant slash ragdoll. Fast forward, this is during the Civil War, and her white father is a general. He goes into the army. We all know how it ends. The South loses, and the plantation was located in the South, so that meant all the slaves were let go to be free. Can I forget about the blacks with the offhanded, disrespectful, white appealing comments and opinions? Now, Raven-Symoné with the whole dark white, chocolate, square pants, hockey stick eyebrows, ghetto deciphering of names with two first names with a hyphen in between and an accent mark, but have the audacity to tell whose name is appropriate and whose name is not. Raven's opinions and her saying what she's saying is either for attention or she is just purely ignorant. Whether she is generally ignorant or generally a troll, she'll find out real quick how racist Hollywood is. Who would have guessed adorable Olivia would have turned into psychic Raven who would have turned into what she is today on The View. Now, Raven was in an episode where she was racially discriminated against, and she kind of brought that to light on the Zizzy channel to turn around and be disparaging towards other people and think that's alright. I remember seeing her in the Light Girls documentary before I even knew her on The View, and she talked about how she didn't feel comfortable in her skin being so light and that she had to tan her skin. And when she was doing That's So Raven, the camera guy or the lighting people were basically like, Raven, can you stop manipulating your skin tone because we have to readjust the camera to reflect your skin or whatever. And I'm like, so from Light Girls to The View, somehow you thought you weren't dark enough and now you just think you just so light that you're damn near white. Okay, girl. I'm not sure those tanning bands that she was using to darken herself had fried through her brain and caused her to be who she is today. I couldn't tell you, because she was raised in Hollywood. Like, she was known as Little Olivia on the Cosby Show. She never had a regular black life and a black experience with racism, white supremacy. Because she had the opportunity to live an abnormal life that most people don't experience, her mindset of the black experience is distorted because she hasn't really lived it, and thus she may have those mentalities and those opinions based off of her irregular experience. But as all black people, whether you're rich or poor, light or dark, you will always experience some form of racism because of the society that we live in. So she's bound to have her nigger wake-up call, and I don't know if she is going to be able to handle that, or is she going to brush it off and be like, I can just continue trying to prove that I'm different from these other Negroes. I mean, I'm so different. I have always been in the limelight. Don Lemon, or as some people call him, Don Lemonade, is right there with Raven-Symoné, except I believe that he is trolling. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's not ignorant. He loves to play into the gay, liberal, quote-unquote, hidden right-wing mentality, exercising his freedom of speech, but low-key has some self-hating, disparaging words towards black people, and enjoys being a donkey and saying disrespectful things about black people to entertain and appease right-wing opinion, Fox News watching, America, Confederate flag swinging crowd. And his whole cover-up is, I'm a no minority too. Not only am I black, but I'm gay. And I think he's playing into the whole being gay thing, where you can't really attack him or oppose his opinion, because that would be like attacking him because he's a minority. But I hope he knows the gay community is just as racist as the straight white community. So I hope he's prepared for that, because no matter where he goes, no matter what he uses as a cover-up, they will always see him as black. No matter if he wears a suit or he wears some baggy jeans. He plays an agitator role because that is what brings headlines. That is what people use to go at black people. You see, especially within the media, that certain people may not like blacks, may not like minorities, but they specifically go after blacks. They specifically disrespect, they specifically try to agitate and harass black people just to get some type of reaction. And I think Don Lemon is doing the same thing. But Don Lemon, if he ever crosses that point, crosses that line, he may find himself canceled on CNN. Whereas if he disrespects black people, he may get a raise. But you disrespect Jews, you get canceled. Some people won't take it. Whereas black people, we may get up in arms and feel disrespected, but unfortunately take it. But he'll soon get his Negro wake-up call, because as much as they use him as bait to gain attention, when they're done with him, they will dismiss him. The Negro wake-up call does not discriminate. David Clark, Milwaukee Chief Coon, saying police brutality doesn't exist. He's one of those, I have a little affirmative action position decades back. I'm the only black who works in my department, or one of the few blacks who are there. So I have to show everybody that I can roll with the big dogs. I can roll with the punches. I can be just as down and just as supportive of the system, even if the system is oppressive and discriminatory, so I can earn my keeps and hopefully climb the ladder and secure my position in being one of them. It's not a coincidence that he has the same right-wing mindset and ends up on Fox. Plus, he's married to a white woman, so of course that mentality seeps in. Typically when someone is marrying outside their race, it's typically when it is a black person sleeping with a white person. Hence the bed wench, hence the bed buck mentality that has been talked a lot about in the past 2 years. Clark regurgitates a lot of things that he has been told and a lot of things that he has been trained to believe. The good old boys manuscript of how to make it in America as a coon. I don't really need to bring up the many fallen victims of white supremacy who had been gunned down by the police departments of the United States. But then again, according to him, these people were killed by the police brutally, but then again, police brutality doesn't exist, so maybe they just magically died and those bullets magically ended up in their body that magically came from the gun of a police officer, but no correlation to police brutality and blacks. Just happenstance. His quote, "Then the police can show up and arrest these subhuman creeps for creating a disturbance. Hope he knows some of those murdered creeps are dead black officers, because once you take off that blue suit and that badge, you are just like all the other Negroes. You are no different. You do not stand out. No one gives you a special symbol that tells you that you are opposite. Soon as all those garbs are taken off, you get treated just like any other Negro." And some black cops had faced that reality, whether it was racial profiling, whether it was being pulled over by other cops, whether it's mistaken quote-unquote identity, whether it's even being shot. But according to him, police brutality doesn't exist. It's race baiting or a figment of us black people's imagination. So those dead officers who were gunned down by their fellow officers, I wonder if they were subhuman creeps too. I wonder if you'd be saying the same thing if it was his children, his half-black children, who were racially profiled and were killed. Would he believe that his children are subhuman creeps, that his children deserve to be treated badly, and it's not because they're black? His children really are subhuman creeps. It's clear that he sold out, most definitely, but this is the last stage of the special Negro complex. Before the wake-up call, the nigga wake-up call, because there's always a wake-up call. Whether it's earlier in your life, whether it's later in your life, you can never escape that call. Because once white supremacy can use you and manipulate you and form you to what they want, and they no longer need you, they will break you and toss you. There's always a wake-up call. Never forget it. Bill Cosby's going through his right now. Michael Jackson went through his. OJ through his. And many other blacks. You think you are special. You think you are given a certain title, a certain respect, a certain level, until the people who give it to you snatch it right underneath you. This is why I felt the need to make a video about the special Negro complex, because you could see all the way from 1804 when Haiti won its independence from France, and from now today 2015, that's over a century ago. You still see the mentality of trying to appease white people. Over 2 centuries ago, trying to appease, trying to fit and mold and break and bend, and trying to appease people who systematically oppress you. And no matter what you do, no matter how much education you have, no matter how you dress, no matter what you do, you can still be treated like any Negro, and you're not that special. So this is the end of the video. Be blessed, and I'm out.